Just so you know what's going to happen, Werner Herzog will have a conversation with all of you right now. We have until 7 p.m., so just about half an hour. First of all, I would like to ask you, last year you already did a documentary called Into the Abyss. And one of the inmates, Michael Perry, whom we saw briefly at the beginning of the third documentary, figured in that. What gave you was that the impulse to do this documentary as well? Could you say a little bit about that, please?
Ich würde gerne Deutsch sprechen, aber nachdem das hier ein sehr internationales Publikum ist, I switch into English. Well, Into the Abyss is a longer film. It's about 1 hour, 45 minutes long, and it's not just portraits of an individual. It is about a senseless crime, a triple homicide, as senseless as it can get. I mean, mind-boggling how senseless it is. And it's more a panorama. It's much more like a tapestry of events. There were actually 2 perpetrators. One was executed 8 days after I spoke to him. The other one got away with a life sentence, in fact, in a different trial with a different jury. And his father, with whom I also talked on camera, saved his life in the sentencing phase. And of course, the film contains a very remarkable figure, one of the executioners, the former captain of the tie-down team, who after 125 executions, all of a sudden has a breakdown. In fact, execution of a female. And 2 days later, he starts to shake uncontrollably and cannot stop crying. And it's a very, very haunting, very intense statement ultimately against capital punishment. And I personally didn't want to make an outright activist film against capital punishment. And you see, being a guest in the United States as a German, it's very hard to tell them after, and I say with a different historical background, and I have to say, yes, during the Nazi time we had an excessive amount of capital punishment, parallel to that systematic program of euthanasia for being insane, and on top of it a genocide of 6 million Jewish people. So end of story. I don't even have an argument, and I do not know anyone in my generation, German, who is not against capital punishment. I don't know anyone. And but as a German, you cannot tell the Americans how to handle their criminal justice. So in this case, I decided there should be, yes, my position is clear. I make it clear at every single beginning of a film. And at the same time, there's something subversive pervading the films. And it's quite obvious that, in my opinion, there's not even a debate possible that a human being should not be executed by a state. A state under no circumstances, at no time, should ever have the capability to kill off anyone for any reason. The only the only exception, in my opinion, is warfare, and even that, of course, is debatable because we do have people who think very fundamentally, and they would remain pacifists no matter what, whether we are attacked or not, whether we have to defend our values, our families, our whatever. So, but I personally see warfare as the only moment where a state somehow advocates killing of someone, in this case of the enemy. But even that is very, very debatable.
You focused on 5 individuals here. How many did you actually contact before that, and how many did you have to choose from?
I contacted more. In particular, there was a woman who was very, very fascinating, and she declined. She did not want. Then there was another inmate, very, very fascinating case. I tried to start from the cases and the personalities, to have some sort of a spectrum of possibilities. And an inmate wanted to talk to me, but in the last moment, his attorney sent me an email, please do not talk to him, we have an appeal ongoing, and my client has a tendency to say stupid things. So, and I immediately said, this is cancelled, I'm not going to jeopardize an ongoing appeals procedure. Yes, there were some others, but I wanted to have, for example, Garcia Rivas, in both cases, an excessive kind of punishment for previous crimes, which means in Rivas's case, 31 consecutive life sentences plus 99 years for taking the car of the maintenance workers for 2 miles without being allowed, without asking permission from them. So 99 years in addition. So these men were angry, and the crime, the escape itself was something very fascinating for me, because it was such an amount of intelligent and almost military execution. A great movie in itself. Or Skinner, who is just a wild talking, wonderful man in a way. And
so how many people did you have to choose from in the beginning?
Well, there are about almost 400 death row inmates in Texas, and I'm speaking of Texas because they are very media friendly. They would allow you to have a conversation on camera. And Florida also fairly media friendly. In both states who actually execute their inmates, by far the largest population of death row inmates actually is California, because they do not execute them. They can sentence you to death, but they wouldn't execute you. There's a moratorium. So the population on death row keeps growing, and they have over 600 by now. So, and it will keep growing. And in a way, I liked to be in Texas for 2 reasons. I like Texas in a way. There's something very solid about it, and if you ever have a chance to see Into the Abyss, if you see the former tie-down captain, that's a man who you would only find in Texas, not in New York or Boston or in San Francisco. Very, very solid, good, credible men of great inner integrity. You can find them, of course, and I'm not in the mood and in the business of Texas bashing. It is very, very easy to do that. And I do not like a political attitude of a political elite in the United States. And I'm speaking of the political elite on the East Coast, Boston, New York, and so on. And on the other side, Seattle, San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles. And these people would, in regular conversation, speak about the rest of America as the flyovers. They're the flyovers. And the flyovers are fundamental Christian, and they are for capital punishment, and they are this, that, and the other. And I personally do not like the attitude, because I like the American heartland. Too long for this discourse here to explain, but I like the heartland. Of course, I like Los Angeles as well, because I live there. But of course, it should be open for you. If you have any question, please,
yes, please.
Go ahead. Yes, gentleman here. Can I? Thank you. Yeah, okay.
Almost every single inmate seemed sympathetic in a way. How do you stop yourself? How do you refrain yourself from sympathizing with them too much?
Well, it's not real great sympathy. I respect them as human beings, and I make it very, very clear. I do not try to humanize them. They are human beings, and I make it very, very clear. The the crimes are monstrous. However, the perpetrators are never monsters themselves. They are always human beings. So that's a basic attitude. So I do not try to make them heroes as some sort of the outlaw hero against the state and against society, and I do not try to emotionalize them or whatever. They're simply just human beings, and I respect them like that. And of course, in case of Perry or in case of James Barnes, I tell them, although your childhood was a complicated one, number one, it does not exonerate you, and number two, it does not necessarily mean that I have to like you. And in Perry's case, whom we saw very, very briefly, who is a protagonist or one of the protagonists of Into the Abyss, he immediately stops, and it was 120 seconds into the discourse with him. And I knew I had to say it, and I knew this probably is the end of the film. After 120 seconds, I could have said, this is over now, because he will stand up, walk out, and never talk to me again. And for a moment he hesitates, and he says, yes, I understand that. And apparently they all liked me. They really liked me. They all wanted me back, which is a sign, because I was so straightforward. And they can, if you spend 10, 12, 17 years on death row in isolation, you can probably see from a mile distance whether somebody is a bullshitter or somebody is phony. The attorneys are all phony. They're all upbeat. Yeah, we still have a chance. The family is only emotional and denies accepting that the son or the daughter is a murderer. I'm the only one who talks to them straight, and they all liked it. But of course, a risky business, because it could have been over within 120 seconds.
The gentleman here in the fourth row, if you can get a microphone.
For the most part, you asked the inmates to describe what they could see of the outside world from their cell, and you also asked them about their dreams. What interests you about learning about people's dreams, and also what are your dreams?
Well, I don't. The second part of the question is easy to answer. I do not dream. I have no dreams. I don't dream at night, and all psychologists, who are one of the great mistakes of the 20th century. I mean, so intense a mistake, a part of many other factors, that I believe the 20th century per se was a mistake in its totality. But they claim that everybody dreams so and so much. No, I don't. Very, very rarely I dream, and if I dream, it's banalities. I think 2.5 years I dreamt the last time, and I dreamt that I had a sandwich for lunch. So that's about it. But maybe because of this lack, because of this void, I have become a filmmaker. That might be a possibility. And the second reason why, sometimes I started to speak about their dreams themselves. And of course, when you are confined into a concrete, tiny little cell for 23 hours a day, and only one day you can walk around in a small cage. It's actually cages for them on death row. They live in their fantasies, they live in their dreams, and their humanness somehow condenses in their dreams. And because of that, I was always fascinated about this. But and also it shows a very human side. The strange thing is that they are not that far away from what we are. In many cases I had the feeling they were only one step away from what constitutes me. Although I rarely ever had the impulse for murder. Sometimes yes, but I think it happens to others as well. But it's an interesting question about looking deep inside of these human beings. And this is why I came without any catalogue of questions. I was not like a journalist. And the difficult thing is you have 50 minutes, 10 minutes to set up your camera, 50 minutes to talk. You have to find the right tone and the right rapport instantly. And if you don't have it in you, you will fail. It's very strange I've been asked by film students, how do you do it? You cannot learn it anywhere. You cannot learn it in film school or anywhere. You have to have it. You have to know the heart of men in a way. And then you do a film like this. And I would like to, sorry for being so long in your short question, Into the Abyss starts with a death row chaplain. And I had 25 minutes with him. He came on location and tapped his wristwatch and he said, quick, I have to be in the death house assisting the execution in 40 minutes. So I barely could give him my name, and I said, is it okay that we place you here? And he's in front of a graveyard, and he said yes. And he starts talking to me like a phony TV preacher. He starts speaking like about a God that is merciful and forgiving and redemption for everyone and paradise, and that the creation of God is also beautiful. And sometimes in the morning on the golf course when he's all alone, he would switch off his cell phone and listen to the sounds of nature, and he would see some squirrels. Recently he saw a horse looking at him and some deer looking at him, and that was a moment where I had to stop him. And I asked him something nobody else on God's wide earth would have asked him. From behind the camera, with a very cheerful voice, I asked him, tell me about an encounter with a squirrel. And within 10 seconds he unravels, he comes apart, he almost starts to cry. He completely comes apart and is himself. And it's an odd moment where I didn't ask him about a dream, but about an encounter with a squirrel. So tell me the film school that will teach you that one. Yes.
The gentleman in the
sorry.
high seat. Sorry.
This, as you were saying earlier, that this is fodder for, another Shawshank Redemption, another dead man walking or what have you. And you are an established feature filmmaker as well, with a blazing trail. What was it that made you choose the documentary mode as opposed to the feature film mode? And I mean, it's a question of form, of course, but I'm just curious. Why not go the Truman Capote way, or, yeah.
Yes, sure. Yeah, it's a completely open field. For me, there's still an option out there to make a feature film, but not on Rivas Garcia on death row and for having murdered the police officer, the prison escape. It's really a real movie story. Other cases, maybe Linda Carty would be an interesting feature film, but probably so grim, so worrisome that people, having seen a feature film like that, would wish never have been born ever. So difficult to make that into a feature film. Skinner, it's not that interesting, the case itself, but the man is very interesting. James Barnes as the ultimate horror film, yes, possible. A man who enters, I believe he's the ultimate nightmare for women. the ultimate nightmare, that a man comes in stark naked, hides in your closet for 4 hours, watches the woman, how she's doing household chores, how she's cooking, how she's watching a soap opera, how she's taking a shower, and then emerge, rape her, kill her, burn her to death on a bed. The ultimate nightmare. But again, yes, probably something for a feature film, but I never really contemplated it. I jumped into it without much reflection. I always had it in me. Strangely enough, the very, very first film I ever wanted to make when I was 15, 16, 17 or so was about prison, maximum security prison in Bavaria, Straubing prison. And I came across some correspondence from that time, and I can only say I have to thank God on my knees that at that time I didn't make that film, because it was just very stupid what I had in mind. Very immature, very stupid. So in a way it was dormant in me, and all of a sudden it came very easily to make this film. And anyone, not even being a film student, you can make these films. It's very, very simply made, and I like the simplicity of doing a documentary versus a feature film. But there's a lot of feature film subjects in it, sure.
There's a question here.
I was left with the impression that the death row convicts here, maybe apart from Linda Carty, are very intelligent, and they seem to choose their words very, very well. And is that because they have so much time to ponder upon?
Yes, of course they have a lot of time. And Linda Carty was a very good student. She actually came from the Caribbean, St. Kitts, which makes her a British subject. She was good in school. She was well educated. Once she arrived in the United States, started to study at college, and then got into drugs and spiraled down. And of course, that amount of time in prison, in solitary confinement, makes you think over your case. And many of them read in the library legal cases. James Barnes, for example, is very, very fluent in precedents and, for example, a Ferretta hearing. And I looked into all this before I talked to him. I knew he was invoking the Ferretta hearing. Linda Carty was street smart. She had worked not very long time for the Drug Enforcement Agency, and you have to be street smart and you have to be manipulative. And it's stunning how she talked 3 street thugs into believing that there was 900 pounds of weed in this one apartment. And I asked Chris Robinson, how can she do that? How does she manage to do that? And I like the moment when he says greed. It's just greed. But she's eloquent. They're all somehow eloquent. And you have cases on death row who are borderline retarded, or have an IQ so low that they are not really good in any conversation. And I spoke to another death row chaplain who told me about one inmate who wanted to have some, in the last hours, some simple toys in the last holding cell. And he, the chaplain, tried to explain to him what the procedures now were, that he was going to be taken to the gurney, and then there would be the lethal injection. And the inmate asked him, and what do we do then after the execution? So it's you would have to make a choice, and Linda Carty was clearly a choice of somebody who was very eloquent. Every single one is in a way eloquent.
The gentleman here.
But sorry to add one more thing. Documentary filmmaking has a lot to do with casting. It's very much like doing a feature film. You have to find the right cast. And then you will always be in fascinating terrain.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. There was a gentleman here, and then there was some... Okay, you're after that.
Hi. I was wondering, over here.
Okay, yeah.
Did you ever have to compromise the message of the movie because you were controlled by the U.S. government or the Justice Department?
No, I was not. There was some self-censorship in one case when Garcia asks me, I don't want to say that word on camera, and I say I'll bleep it out, which I did. Yes, there was censorship. There was censorship, but not from the state, nor from the producing co-producers or from the network in the United States or anywhere. Strangely enough, today, censorship is shifting somewhere else. And it shifts to, for example, completion bond companies, or it's in our case, it shifted to the E&O, errors and omissions insurance company. In one case, the twin sister of James Barnes says, here's a photo of all my siblings, and I mourn for my sister who committed suicide, and I mourn for my brother who didn't make it. I think he committed suicide, the sister, I don't remember. And then she says, and I could have been a casualty. She was actually in prostitution, I think, and all sorts of criminal activities. And now what I had to cut out. And I mourn for, and I worry for the little brother who turned into a self-mutilator. So every single one of them either committed suicide or is on death row or is into drugs or a self-mutilator. The E&O insurance said to us, if you do not bring testimony from a hospital or from a physician making it clear that she is really a self-mutilator, we will not cover your case. You will not cover this film, and if they do not cover it, immediately finances from television stations stop. So I cut this out. So strangely enough, censorship today is moving into the institutionalized cowardice of error and omission insurances and other elements out there.
There was a question here, the lady in the grey jumper.
I was wondering if a movie usually brings up new questions and new ideas that might follow like to the next movie, or do you usually need like an empty space in between for you to come up with the next idea?
No, not really. There are too many things going on at the same time. In fact, I made 6 films last year, and I ran my own film school, and I acted in a film with Tom Cruise as being the villain, and I'm doing an installation at the Whitney Museum, which is opening in 2 weeks. There's never anything in between. The problem is I can't really catch up quickly enough with everything that's coming at me. So I try to be economical, and I'm a calm worker, steadily and calmly, but I edit very fast. I really edit very fast. I write very fast. I film very fast. So, but it comes easily with one exception. I mean, in this case, Death Row and Into the Abyss. When you are filming on Death Row with these people, you are so much under pressure. You have 50 minutes. You have to perform. You have to stand and deliver and perform and do the right thing, find the right tone, cover what you wanted to cover. Only sitting back in editing, all of a sudden you have time and you look at everything. And that's where you have to take time, and that's where it hits really hard. Both my editor, Joe Beanie, and I started smoking again. And we are steady 8-hour guys. We would work 8 hours from 10 to 6 normally. In this case, of all these films, we could only work from 10 to 3, and then it was over, and we said we have to stop this. Let's smoke one more cigarette, and we'll be out of there. So it's not that it doesn't leave any traces. So thank you very much for coming here and joining us for such a long afternoon. And just one note of encouragement, every one of you could have made all these films that you have seen this afternoon. So my wishes for best of luck with your own projects. My best wishes.
Thank you very much, Werner Herzog. Thank you and have a good journey home. Cheers.